Imagine standing at the gates of what you thought was success, an ivory tower, some would call it gleaming with possibility. There was a time when I was just an aerospace engineer with dreams soaring high, yet my reality felt as heavy as lead. My name, Dr. Imani Wright, PhD from Cambridge. Yeah, sounds pretty impressive on paper, doesn't it? But in that moment, as I watched the sleek Gulfstream jet taxiing on the runway at Teterboro Airport, I was reminded of the whispers lurking behind my back. Who does she think she is? They'd say, dismissing my accent like it was some oversized burden rather than a part of my story. I lived for years feeling like I had to prove myself, not just my worth in the boardroom, but my right to be there at all. It wasn't always easy to brush aside the doubts planted by others, and sometimes I'd grapple with those same fears, wondering if I really belonged in a world where privilege seemed to drown out all voices but a chosen few. Yet here I was boarding that jet, shaking hands with wealth, while the cold winds of judgment sent shivers down my spine. I'd spent my life accumulating knowledge and skill, but that day was about to teach me an even tougher lesson. Captain Marcus Thorne was in the cockpit, and his smug arrogance was about to put everyone on that flight at risk. It seemed ironic, right? He could have been my ally in the skies, but little did he know a storm was brewing, and I wasn't about to be the one who slipped through the cracks. The cabin thrummed with an uneasy energy as we soared through the skies, but no one noticed the anxiety swirling inside me. I could only focus on the absurdity of it all. There I was, a seasoned aerospace engineer, and the captain a self-proclaimed god of the skies, belittling my expertise over the intercom like a cheap comedian. Look at our little doctor trying to sound smart. Thorne chuckled, his voice dripping with mockery. Isn't she adorable? Someone get her a textbook. The laughter that punctuated his words dug into my skin. I clenched my fists, my fingernails digging into my palms. Anger boiled beneath the surface, but I fought against it. I had to stay poised. He had no idea that I was gathering evidence, building a case against his hubris. A hubris that was about to intertwine with our fate. Beside me, Liam's face had darkened jaw set tight. I can't believe he's getting away with this. I'm going to confront him. No, I interjected, pinning him with a steady gaze. Not yet. We need to play it smart. Wait for the right moment. As the flight wore on, my unease evolved into a chilling dread. I had detected unusual vibrations in the starboard engine, a critical warning signaling potential failure. I stepped forward, approaching the cockpit, heart thumping. Captain Thorne, we have a serious problem, I said, my voice steady but urgent. Everything's just fine, Doctor, he snarled, dismissing me with a wave. You stick to your engines, I'll handle the flying. Each dismissal carved deeper into the unveiled arrogance. This isn't just a malfunction, it's a safety risk. The vibration's enough. His defiance echoed a block of ice crashing against my resolve. I felt every eye in the cabin shifting toward the cockpit. They could sense the tension too. My body burned with indignation, and I knew I had to act. As I stood in that narrow passageway, the cockpit door like a threshold to my confrontation with destiny, I realized then that this wasn't just about pride or power anymore. It was about lives. If something goes wrong, it won't just be you who pays for it, I said, my voice hard as steel. It'll be everyone on this plane. In that moment, I stepped forward, ready to challenge everything he held. I wouldn't be a victim of his arrogance. I would become the architect of my own survival. The atmosphere in the cabin was thick, tension coiling tighter with every second, like that moment when you're 2 hours into a movie and realize it was all just a setup for the sequel. Thorne's arrogance was almost palpable, a living, breathing entity that cackled with disdain. I felt like a piñata at a party where no one wanted to swing a colourful target, just waiting for someone to bring the stick of reality crashing down. When I first reached out about those vibrations, I was met with a dismissive laugh. This was a captain who thought the skies belonged to him alone. What do you know about aviation? He'd sneered, as though my PhD was just a fancy decoration on my wall. Sure. Let's ignore the little spaceship of a plane wincing at 30,000 feet. Not like I've spent my life building machines that touch the stars or anything. Public doubt loomed like storm clouds, my own COO. Liam looked ready to pop a vessel, screaming at Thorne. It was like watching a kettle boil while I stood there, hands tied. Just wait, I told him, trying to sound calm, but inside I was a bag of nerves ready to explode. Each mockery cut deeper, and my patience began to fray. I'd like to say I remained serene, but let's be real, my nails could have painted an entire mural with the amount of stress I was channeling into biting them. Then watching that captain throw my concerns out like they were yesterday's trash. That was the moment I felt the spark of rebellion flicker to life. It was small, sure, just a flicker in the chaos, but with every ounce of defeat, I couldn't shake the feeling I was done being underestimated. So maybe I couldn't fix a rickety relationship with a condescending pilot just yet, but I could sure as hell save us from plummeting through the clouds like a rock thrown from a rooftop. Determination started creeping in, hungry and relentless. Picture a lion looking at a weak gazelle. There I was, strapped into a seat but ready to leap, if just to reclaim a shred of dignity and, stay alive. I wanted to laugh in the face of danger, sarcastically ask Thorne if he'd like to find out how fast gravity pulls us down, but I bit my tongue instead. No one needed to add comedy to impending disaster. We were already in a tragicomedy, weren't we? All that was left was to flip the script. Everything has a breaking point. For Imani, it was this moment. Standing there in the cockpit, the hum of engines buzzing like angry wasps, the air thick with the weight of disbelief. Thorne's condescension had reached its peak, and the realization dawned. She had to act. Marcus, she said, her voice steady, piercing through the cockpit's chaotic aura. The silence hung for a heartbeat. He turned, eyes narrowed. What do you want? I want you to listen. She stepped forward, the boldness rising like molten steel. There are vibrations. This plane. Not now, I know what I'm doing. He sneered, but in that sneer Imani saw cracks, saw the ego folding in on itself, the confidence faltering. David's eyes flicked between them, a lifetime of training, battling with instinct. Captain Imani seized the moment. I have data, real data. This isn't a joke. The weariness in David's gaze shifted, sparking with understanding. Show me, he said quietly. With a quick breath, Imani laid out the raw, undeniable facts. She could feel the shift, the air around them crackling like static as she ignited a revolution born from despair and desperation. Thorne's facade faltered. We don't have time for this. Then help me prove it, she shot back. or sit down. A moment of silence, tension coiling tighter. But it wasn't just her voice, it was the fire within. Throttle back the engine. David broke the silence, looking straight at Thorn. Now! And just like that, the tide shifted. The vibrations ceased to silence, replacing the chaos. A quiet victory over arrogance. Imani stood tall, no longer the underestimated, but the unstoppable force. She realized that courage was not the absence of fear, but the triumph over it. This was her moment of awakening, a spark that would light the way forward. She wasn't simply fighting for safety now, she was reclaiming her power. And with that revelation, everything began to change. As the plane touched down in Zurich amidst an atmosphere thick with tension, a collective sigh of relief swept through the cabin. Imani's heart raced, but steadied itself as she felt the vibrations of potential disaster dissipate. She had proven her mettle in an arena that had sought to undermine her. The engine was safe thanks to her decisive intervention, and with it the lives aboard were spared from the fate Captain Thorne seemed determined to invite. Later that day, in a pristine glass boardroom overlooking the Swiss skyline, the tension was palpable. Imani stood at the front, taking in the faces of the board members. This was her domain now. Among them sat Thorne, his once mighty facade diminished and eroded by the reality of his own misjudgments. The sleek table bore witness to the indelible mark the past hours had left on their professional lives. Thank you for gathering here. She began, her voice steady, yet infused with an undercurrent of humility. Today we witnessed not just averted tragedy, but a crucial lesson in respect and accountability. We must never forget that expertise can come from unexpected places, and that each of us has a role to play in ensuring safety. She glanced at Thorne, a quiet smirk flickering across her face as she continued. I'll be initiating new protocols at Zenith Aviation Ones that encourage open dialogue, valuing every opinion and background. A ripple of murmurs surged through the room, but it was her next words that sealed the moment. As for you, Captain Thorne, this is your last day. The boardroom fell silent, the air thick with disbelief and whispers of affirmation. She had made her point, and it was resonant. Imani nodded to the others, and as she turned away, she felt the weight of the moment sink in. It was not just the victory that mattered. It was the journey that had brought her here, the scars, struggles, and a determination forged in the fires of disrespect. Success hadn't erased those marks. It had simply made them worthy battle scars in a fight that transcended individual ambition. And as she stepped from the boardroom onward, she forged deeper roots, anchoring her for the next challenge ahead. As we close the chapter on this tumultuous journey, we're left to ponder the fragile interplay between power, trust, and revenge. Imani Wright, once an overlooked engineer, transformed before our eyes, not just in stature, but in spirit. She stood up against the arrogance of Captain Thorne, revealing how easily pride can erode the foundations of authority. In doing so, she didn't just reclaim her dignity, she illuminated a path for others to follow. What does this teach us about power? It shows that arrogance is its own undoing, but it also raises a deeper, more controversial question. Is revenge ever truly justified, or does it only perpetuate a cycle of bitterness? For some, Thorne's downfall might feel like poetic justice, a necessary retribution for his despicable behaviour. For others, it could come across as a cautionary tale reminding us that gloating in someone else's failure can lead us to miss the lessons in forgiveness and growth. Imani has chosen to rise above the bitterness, advocating for a culture of respect within Zenith Aviation. Yet, as we reflect on her journey, we confront a moral divide that invites debate. Is it better to seek justice or to foster understanding? As you contemplate these questions, I invite you to share your thoughts. Have you experienced a moment where revenge seemed like the only answer? Or do you believe that true strength lies in rising above hate? Let's talk in the comments below. Your voice matters.